Alright, here's the deal. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was not as smart as we all think he was. And I'll explain why. I don't even know if I should call him Reverend because I don't think he was an authentic Reverend. Maybe on an official basis in terms of his job title, sure. But he does not do authentic Christianity any justice whatsoever. Maybe in this era of wokeism and postmodernism, sure. But he does not do authentic Christianity any justice. Martin Luther King was a trained Marxist, and anybody who knows anything about Karl Marx knows that he was most certainly not a Christian. He did not believe that morals should be at the forefront, but they should be on the back burner. He even wrote satanic poetry, for crying out loud. But yet the American Christian Church still praises this man for his work, as if he did anything for Christianity whatsoever outside being a Baptist reverend, which I would argue that he is properly represented not as a reverend, but as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. for his work in civil rights. Which brings me to my next point. He was not that good for civil rights, and Christians and civil rights activists alike praise him for the uniqueness in his methods as if they had any impact whatsoever, or more so a positive impact, which they didn't. Most people think that he was just non-violent, and that's just not the case. He was non-violent, but that does not mean that he's a non-radical version of Malcolm X. That's just not the case. Because even more than their methods, their philosophies, and even their end games were different. And I think it goes to show how much people really just don't know about Malcolm, and how the perception around Martin Luther King has been very much manipulated over the years. Which is why I would argue it's very suspicious that they would celebrate Martin Luther King and not Malcolm X. And by suspicious, of course, I mean convenient. But Martin Luther King, again, was an integrationist, which basically, and we know the story about the bus boycotts and the sit-ins at bars and diners and so forth. There's nothing inherently wrong about those things per se, but the philosophy of integration was completely surrounded by forcing people to accept other people of a certain demographic. The sit-ins were basically to say, hey, we're here whether you like us or not. Deal with it. And I think it's weird, personally, I do. Because first of all, you're targeting the wrong set of people. You're going after business owners for being the ones responsible for these regulations when they're really not. It's the state that was at the forefront of this, and they have been since the very beginning. It's not the people of this nation that have historically been racist, it's the state that has ruled over them that has been, and always has been. Which brings me to my next point. This idea of integration is a complete joke. Anybody who doesn't think that has a purely slave mentality. And Malcolm even said this himself. So long as you keep begging the white man to accept you, you are always going to answer to him because you think he's superior to you. You're going to keep trying to immigrate the white man's business, eat in the white man's restaurant, eat the white man's food, and make the white man's money when you could be making your own money. This whole idea of blacks integrating white America only makes sense if you think that black people actually are inferior to white folks. Which is why I would argue that Malcolm was more so on the right track than Martin Luther King was. And that's why I think civil rights activists should really stop hyping this man up. Unless they're willing to admit that they themselves are Marxists. In which case, leaders of Black Lives Matter, I'm not too concerned with them doing so. Because they themselves have come out and said, yeah, we're Marxists. I don't know about any of the rest of you, but I personally take much more influence from Malcolm X than I would Martin Luther King. Malcolm having been a Muslim notwithstanding. Which somebody's going to say, well, Martin Luther King was a Christian, so why wouldn't you take more influence from him as opposed to a Muslim? And to that I say what I've already said. I don't think he was an authentic Christian. He's openly endorsed philosophies brought about by Karl Marx, who is very non-Christian, and even applauds him for holding the church accountable, whatever that means. Which, as I showed you earlier, just means putting them on the back burner and saying, you're not important until all these other things get worked out. When authentic faith entails we are essential to get these things worked out. But that's not what Marxism entails, which is why I don't think Martin Luther King was an authentic Christian. And I don't even think he was an authentic civil rights leader, if I'm being honest. Because again, Martin Luther King's philosophy was basically that black people won't feel liberated and won't feel dignified in any way until they have all these other things. But Malcolm X's philosophy, which is one I endorse, is that it's not until the black man can look at himself and accept himself as opposed to getting the white man to accept him, that he can actually be a productive member of society and actually get things done and be able to provide for himself and make his own money. And I think most people today know that, especially black people. Because the black peers I have, admittedly, are some of the most productive people I know. And some of them even make more money than me. But somehow that's not supposed to happen because I'm white? No, because race doesn't have anything to do with it. But anyways, even their interpretations of what the end game should be between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, those were very different. Martin Luther King's goal as a civil rights leader, was basically to integrate white America and force the white man to accept the black man by way of sit-ins and boycotts and integration. When Malcolm X's philosophy was quite the contrary. He openly called out other civil rights leaders for getting so caught up in the methods that they had that they forgot what their goal was, or at least what their goal was supposed to be, and by Malcolm's interpretation was to be the dignity of the black man, to be able to look at himself and accept himself and become everything that he wants to become. Granted, Malcolm took it to the extreme because he was a separatist. Malcolm's idea of separation was that give us black people our own space, let us do our own thing, give us our own land, give us our own property, and let us fend for ourselves. Don't scratch our back, because that would entail that we then have to scratch yours. And then we'll be continued in this cycle of you being superior to us. But with that, don't get me wrong, I'm not a separatist by any means, but I'm most certainly not an integrationist either. Granted, I am white, so I can't imagine it make a difference anyway. Which somebody's going to say begs the question, why am I even making this video? Because, like I said in my last video, these videos are really hard to make because they're convicting and liberating at the same time. It's really hard to separate yourself from what you always knew from what you know now. Nothing is as it has always appeared to be. And I'm learning that more and more every single day. And I'm learning more and more that Martin Luther King Jr. Day is really just a prop up by the white left, which Malcolm X kind of alluded to what is now 50 plus years ago. He said that the enemy of black folks is the white liberal, which I didn't think at first I was going to bring this up because it's such a broad statement to make that it's not even worth delving into. It's such a super simplistic idea that why would I even bring it up? But considering historically liberalism in America has been hijacked by the left, it might as well be leftism. Might as well. And I despise how people, especially on the right, they throw out the word liberal so loosely, which I'm not going to go into right here because this video is already long enough. But Malcolm did say that the enemy of black folks is the white liberal. And he said not to trust black folks that are being propped up by the white left because they're basically just being used as props to lure black people in. And I would have to say almost 60 years later, he's been 100% right about it. We've had a black president and nothing for black people, nothing positive for black people has really happened. And I'm not even suggesting that if Obama was a Republican that it would be any different, because I do not think that it would. It's about representation for these people, and representation in politics, and really just media in general, is just a mind game. They're playing with your head. They're propping these people up so that hopefully you can trust them because they have this person over here saying, oh, hey, look at this person. We've accepted this person, so we accept you too. If anything, I just consider that a slap in the face. Because first off, I'm not that person, and to suggest I am based on one character trait that they have is insulting. And second, I'm not looking for your acceptance. If I had to answer to you to make any progress in this world, I wouldn't make any. Which is why I would consider most leftists to be some of the most unproductive people on the planet. Because most of them are just waiting around and even showing up to the ballot box for people that they're just putting their whole faith in, keeping their fingers crossed that if their candidate gets elected, then maybe things will be different and things will be taking a turn for the better for them, as if they don't have any control of their own destiny. Pathetic. Would I argue that black people have historically been oppressed? Absolutely, but it's not by the people of America themselves, it's been by the state. Hundreds of years of history will tell you that. So stop blaming the white man that you see down the street and start blaming the white man on Capitol Hill who hasn't done jack squat for you. Because we want to help and we're doing our very best. It's the people that you're voting for that have already given up on you long before you were able to put your faith in them. And honestly, I think most of us know that the state has been the forefront, that the U.S. government has been at the forefront of black oppression in this country. So that begs the question, why would you put your faith in them to go the opposite direction? If they have been at the forefront of discrimination against the likes of you for hundreds of years, why would you expect them to just turn around and say, oh no, you have to be okay with these people, accept them for who they are. That is textbook Stockholm Syndrome. You cling on to these politicians as if they care about you when you have full knowledge of the fact that they absolutely do not. Which is why I don't think Martin Luther King was as brilliant as people give him credit for being. And I really get sick and tired of seeing these articles about him and referencing him as a black libertarian. He was not a libertarian. He believed in the redistribution of wealth. Libertarians do not believe in that. But yeah, Martin Luther King should not have as important of a holiday as he does if Malcolm X is not going to be just as important and be celebrated as being just as essential, because he's not. I didn't even know until recently that there was a Malcolm X Day, and I think that's done on purpose because they're trying to throw him under the rug because he was an authentic black leader, one that actually wanted the very best for black people, not just to give them the very best. That's just me though. But inevitably, you guys let me know what you think. I am just young and dumb after all. I turned 20 on Sunday, and my single drops called Growing Up is Overrated, so be on the lookout for that. And also, I talked about my black peers being harder workers than I am and making more money than me. I was directly talking about my boy Isaiah Jones, which if you're not following him, you absolutely should be. He's got like half a dozen Instagram accounts, but here's his account for music. He's got an album on the way, so be on the lookout for that. And yeah, I think that's all for now. So, see you later.